All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for our second match of the day. These two teams are vying to enter into the semi-finals of the TCJ Debates 2025. In proposition, we have the Shortwood Teachers College, and in opposition, the Bethlehem Moravian College. Teams, you are aware of the time signals, but for completion, I will give them again. The first speaker, you will have 7 minutes. The second speaker, you will have 6 minutes. And the third and final speaker, you will have 5 minutes. The first and last minute of each speech is protected time in which no points of information will be allowed. You will hear an indication of the bell once you've exited your protection time. There it was. Once you enter into your last minute of your speech, you'll hear the bell again. Once you've elapsed your allocated time, you'll hear the bell ding twice. That means that you've used up all your time. However, we give you 15 seconds if you're in the middle of a thought to wrap it up. After that 15 seconds, you'll hear the bell dinging continuously, and that means that we're no longer listening and you should yield the floor. Now, the motion before us reads, this House would require graduates to complete a 6-month post-degree practicum demonstrating teaching competence before being licensed as teachers. What a motion. And so, to open this debate, we invite the first speaker from Shortwood Teachers College, Lloyd Hyman. The floor is yours.
Mr. Speaker, adjudicators, members of this honorable House, my opponents, good afternoon. Education is the backbone of any nation, and teachers are the builders of that backbone. But let me ask you this, Mr. Speaker, would you trust a doctor to operate only after 4 months of supervised practice? Would you fly in a plane with only a pilot who has never faced the real pressures of real flight? If the answer is no, then I ask, why do we entrust our children, the very heart of Jamaica, to teachers who are licensed after only a brief practicum? Like medicine and aviation, teaching carries life-altering consequences. Therefore, licensures must be demonstrated competence under real-world conditions. As we say in Jamaica, if you want good, your nose off a run. If we truly want quality education, we must truly care about the minds that will one day lead this country. Then, Madam Speaker, we must be willing to raise the standards. That is why, as proposition, we are proud to support the notion this House should require graduates to complete a 6-month post-degree practicum demonstrating teaching competence before being licensed as teachers. By graduates, we mean individuals who have completed their degree. A 6-month post-degree practicum means a structured supervised placement where graduates take full responsibility for their classroom and are evaluated against the Jamaica Teaching Council, JTC National Teaching Standards. And of course, by competence, we mean given or proven full ability to apply knowledge, skill, and professional judgment effectively, ethically, and consistently to enhance the learning of students. Under the JTC Act, a teacher is eligible for licensing only if the council is satisfied that that teacher is competent to teach. Our proposal is the most practical way to verify that competence before granting a full classroom autonomy. So let's be clear. This debate is not whether practicum should exist, they already do. The question here is, should the 4 months be long enough to prove that teachers are competent, or do we give our children the teachers that they deserve, ones who are tested, ready, and licensed? As your first speaker for proposition, I will establish why this notion is both necessary and transformative. First, I will show you how the 6-month post-degree practicum builds stronger, more competent teachers. Secondly, I will prove how it directly elevates the quality of education for our students across Jamaica. And my second speaker, of course, will then extend our case to show how the policies strengthen our education system and secure Jamaica's future. My first point, a 6-month post-degree practicum bridges the gap between theory and practice by allowing teachers to grow from trainees into professionals. Too often, graduates leave university with theory, but too little experience to manage real classroom challenges. Teaching is not just about books. It's about what happens when lesson plan collapse and student focuses are gone. That cannot be learned in lectures, it must be lived. The current 4-month practicum is a part of your degree. It's short, academic, and heavily supervised. It prepares you. It does not prove you. A 6-month post-degree practicum allows for growth, reflection, and mastery, the true markers of competence. Research supports this. Of course, a research by meta-analysis of teachers' coaching programs found significant gains in instructional quality and student outcomes when extended. Monitored practice was included. Similarly, countries like Singapore and Ontario use induction-style training to verify competence by granting full licensure. Jamaica deserves no less, even from my personal experience. As someone who is currently on 4th-year practicum, this difference of workload and independence is absolutely clear. We teach about 12 to 15 sessions weekly, while the licensed teacher handles about 30 or 40 sessions weekly. The jump, huge. Those extra months that we'll get in the 6 months would allow us to experience full responsibility gradually. Under mentor guidance, that is how competence is built, not raised. Every Jamaican student deserves a teacher who was ready from day one. Not someone who is still learning on the job. According to UNICEF 2022 MICS, 38% of Jamaican children aged 7 to 14 lack the foundational reading skills, and only half of them have basic numeracy skills. The Ministry of Education and Youth has acknowledged these as alarming statistics and have implemented interventions. Now, our motion today is to strengthen these efforts. When teachers enter classroom fully prepared, students benefit immediately. Novice errors, especially in early years, can hinder reading and literacy from early. No longer will unprepared teacher keep leaving. Students will no longer will practicum will ensure teachers demonstrate effective instruction, classroom management, and find good feedback. Resident-style preparation also reduces teacher turnover. Evidence from Bookings Institution shows that resident-trained teachers stay longer and perform better in high-stakes or high-need school. That means both stability and quality for rural and inner-city schools. Now to address the opponents, they may argue, we already have 4 months practicum. True, but that is training, not readiness. The 4 months practicum prepares you, the 6-month practicum proves you. They will claim this will work in teacher shortage, but the teachers don't leave because they are overtrained. They leave because they are underprepared. Resident-trained teachers worldwide show retention rates above 80% because they are better prepared to keep or stay in the classrooms. And yes, they also may raise the issue of pay, but this is an investment, not a cost. Just as medical interns are paid while serving hospitals, teachers or teaching interns would contribute to education delivery and deserve stipend, losing their retention. And for this reason, I support this notion.
Thank you very much to the first speaker. That was Lloyd Hyman. To open the debate for the Bethlehem Moravian College, we invite their first speaker, Tristan Bowen.
Do a 6-month practicum period truly measures well-evaluated competence? Honorable judges, members of the House, worthy opponents, and audience, good afternoon. As leader of the opposition, I rise firmly to reject today's motion. This House would require graduates to complete a 6-month post-degree practicum demonstrating teaching competence before being licensed as teachers. Based on my cognitive reasoning, the proposing team had earlier said that a 6-month practicum proves teachers' competence, but we strongly disagree. We, the opposition, define teaching competence according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development as an ongoing ability of a teacher to foster student learning measured through continuous professional evaluation, mentorship, and probationary licensing, not a rigid 6-month hurdle. Aren't teachers assessed all 4 years of teaching colleges? Yes, they are. And I'm sure teaching is a process and not a 6-month event. Now, let us look at what makes a teacher effective. A teacher's effectiveness is context dependent, which means it cannot be measured by a standardized 6-month test, as it won't prove that they are effective. Darling Hammond 2017 research shows that a teacher's quality depends on the pedagogical skills, adaptability to diverse learners, and classroom environment, not just test scores. In my eyes, this is telling me that the government-mandated assessment would rely too much on a standardized metric like curriculum delivery or exam performance, which ignores external factors like poverty, school resources, and parental involvement. For example, a teacher in a rural school that lacks adequate resources cannot be fairly compared to one in an urban school that is well-resourced. Therefore, effectiveness must be measured continuously in real context, not forced into a rigid 6-month evaluation. Performance varies by school and its geographical location. A one-size-fits-all 6-month assessment unfairly disadvantages teachers in struggling schools. According to the Urban National Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, student outcomes are strongly influenced by geography and school resources, with rural and inner-city schools showing significantly lower performance due to systematic inequalities. If teachers' competence is judged by student test results or a standardized rubric, graduates in disadvantaged schools will be unfairly labeled incompetent even though the real issue is structural. This policy does not test teacher ability, but punishes teachers for circumstances beyond their control. What happens if a teacher cannot choose the school that they practicum in? A random placement with standardized assessment creates unfair risk for graduates. Research from Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development 2019 notes that teachers' performance varies drastically depending on student background, school culture, and community support. A graduate placed in a low-performing school may fail their 6-month assessment not because they lack skills, but because students need more time and resources. This not only delays their licensing, but discourages young teachers from staying in the profession. Instead of improving education, the proposition's plan will increase attrition and worsen shortages. What happens if teachers can't choose the schools that they do practicums in? If teachers are judged by a 6-month practicum heavily dependent on a standardized metric, they will gravitate more towards high-performing schools to secure good results. A World Bank 2018 study on teacher placement in the Caribbean found that teachers often perform urban or well-resourced schools, leaving rural schools unsatisfied. With Proposition's model, graduates will avoid disadvantaged schools to protect their license chances, worsening inequality. This undermines the entire education system by concentrating skilled teachers in privileged schools. As my second speaker comes, he will be talking about the robust education system and fallacies on how the postgraduate practicum is more evaluative than developmental, while my third speaker will re-emphasize and summarize what I'd said and be done. Ladies and gentlemen, what makes a teacher effective is not a rigid 6-month practicum, but continuous evaluation, mentorship, adaptability across different schools. The Proposition's model relies on fairly unstandardized assessment, ignores school and geographical disparities, encourages inequality by making teachers avoid disadvantaged school, and discourages graduates by making licensing longer and riskier. Our model provides ongoing evaluation and support while allowing teachers to enter classroom immediately to meet urgent needs. For these reasons, the opposition strongly rejects the motion. I thank you.
All right, this debate has shaped up quite nicely. Two compelling sides of the coin we just heard. At this point in time, we're going to engage in a period of cross-examination. As always, the opposition will start by fielding a question to team proposition. Each question can last 10 seconds and can only be asked by one individual from the team who's asking the question. Each answer can last up to 45 seconds, and the entire team can chip in to provide a substantive answer. Now, with the rules out of the way, we engage in our first period of cross-examination by inviting the first question from team opposition.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Our question to the government is, if the graduate doesn't pass a 6-month practicum, what happens after?
What we're saying is that if graduates don't pass the 6 months practicum, they won't be licensed. And for that reason, we're saying that the 6-month practicum period is necessary, because if you are incapable to teach within that 6 months, how can we therefore send you in the school as a licensed teacher to actually educate our future minds?
All right, so considering that statement, why not embed these quality assurance mechanisms into the colleges so that people don't go to school and study for 4 years only to come out and be denied a license?
Could you please repeat your question?
Why not embed the 6-month practicum for the licensing into the school system so that as soon as the students leave the school, they are competent to teach without having to study the 4 years and come out risking not getting the license?
Because what we're proposing here is we're saying that the 4-month practicum period that we already have is too short of a time for teachers to actually gain valuable experience to actually go into the classroom. Currently on 4th year TP, most of what we do is 12 to 15 sessions, when an actual teacher would have served 40 sessions weekly. We are heavily monitored, and yet we don't get to do parent-teacher conferences. We don't get to see student progress.
What is the difference between, it's actually 5 months of practicum. What is the difference between 5 months of practicum inside of the schools and this practicum you are going to introduce postgraduate?
What we're saying, the 6-month practicum would actually be an entire school term, and we don't do 5 months of practicum in school. No, we don't. During the 4 years, the practicums are separated. One is observation, two is team teaching, where you are with somebody, you're not standing alone. And secondly, we're not saying that practicum shouldn't be done. What we're saying is that this is licensing. Teachers must show that they're competent to be licensed as educators.
Thank you very much for that first period of cross-examination. Want to remind the teams that you only have 3 questions, so there'll be no back and forth while the question is being answered. Just a slight word of caution. All right, thank you for that first half. At this point in time, we invite the proposition team to pose questions to Bethlehem Moravian.
Will you accept that structured coaching improves instruction and student outcomes? And if so, why oppose embedding that coaching in a paid 6 months residency?
Repeat the question.
Will you accept that structured coaching improves instructions and student outcomes? And if so, why oppose embedding that coaching in a paid 6 months residency?
We oppose it because it's redundant. We have supervised practicums within inside of the schools that enable the students to develop before they go out into the field. So adding another practicum session on top of that is unnecessary.
Good afternoon. The 4-month in-school practicum mostly deals with theory. So I'm asking, isn't it better to have a 6-month post-degree practicum that deals with practical?
And again, we are saying that why don't you put this 6-month practicum during the 4 years than after? Because if you're risking graduating then for the 4 years of investment and then for me to fail practicum, I won't get a job. That's rubbish.
My question to you is, isn't it more effective to propose a postgraduate practicum where teachers are no longer students, but they can clearly transition into being trainee teachers?
To my knowledge, once you have graduated university, you're no longer a student. And for that to happen, teachers would not be able to be in the classroom to meet urgent needs. So a 6-month post-degree practicum is totally not acceptable.
Pepper. What an engaging cross-examination. Can we give them a round of applause? All right, and to extend the case for Team Shortwood, we invite Janelle Rounds. Did I pronounce that right? The floor is yours, Janelle. Give her a round of applause.
Honorable adjudicator, members of this house, teammates, and my worthy opponents, good afternoon. Have you ever wondered why some teachers struggle on the very first day despite years of university training? Why does the theory learned in the classroom often fail to translate into real-life success when managing a classroom? Today, we address these questions as we proudly affirm the motion. This House would require graduates to complete a 6-month post-degree practicum demonstrating teacher competence before being licensed as teachers. Before I proceed, let me rebut a statement made by the first speaker of the opposition. We do not stand to disregard external factors. We stand to motivate teachers to perform in spite of it. The undeniable fact, my opponents, is that we cannot afford to send unprepared teachers into Jamaican classrooms where our children's futures depend on their skill and dedication. Today, I will clearly explore how a 6-month post-degree practicum experience is significantly beneficial as it lessens the strain of balancing student and teaching obligations, improves teacher accountability, and does so without raising teacher or educational expenses. As my first speaker eloquently outlined, compared to the current in-school practicums, the proposed practicum is fundamentally different. The new practicum removes the burden of trainee teachers having to struggle dual roles as both students and educators. Imagine enduring a 4-month practicum where you must manage lesson planning, classroom discipline, and administrative duties, all while trying to balance coursework, exams, and extracurricular activities. This real scenario highlights the fundamental weakness in current teacher preparation. It treats practicum as an academic exercise rather than a true test for readiness for the demanding high-stake role of teaching. Ladies and gentlemen, a cross-eyed teacher cannot control its pupils. A student switching from teaching to learning struggles to fully master the complex skills necessary for teaching proficiently. During the proposed practicum, trainee teachers will transition from being students to fully embracing their role as educators. This shift allows them to concentrate entirely on acquiring their professional skills and confidence essential for success in their careers. Additionally, unlike the current in-school system where motivation can stem mostly from supervision and grades, the post-degree practicum fosters genuine professional accountability by requiring teachers to demonstrate actual classroom competence before being licensed. Many graduates will and have admitted that their efforts during prior practicums were driven more by the desire to please supervisors or pass courses than by real-world consequences and responsibilities. My opponents, can we really expect long-term commitment from teachers without authentic professional responsibility? Clearly not. This post-degree practicum focuses on professional accountability, motivating trainees to demonstrate competence for entry into the teaching profession. The 6-month post-degree practicum enhances teaching standards, benefiting student learning and the educational system's credibility. As my first speaker explained, it is about proven competency. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be wondering, does paying teachers during their practicum add to education costs? The simple answer is no. Introducing a paid 6-month practicum is a strategic investment that reduces costs for teachers and the education system. An estimated 15% of new teachers leave Jamaica each year, costing the country millions of dollars in lost teaching time, retraining, and recruitment expenses. The dollars spent on these stipends are returned manifold by securing a competent, stable, and motivated teaching force. It also acts as a filter, ensuring that only capable teachers receive licensure, thereby protecting the system from expensive, ineffective hires. Paying teachers to practice today saves millions in rehiring and retraining tomorrow. In conclusion, the truth is, teaching involves not only content knowledge, not only theory. Teachers today struggle because they have not truly mastered real-time adaptability. Without sufficient continuous hands-on experience, new teachers are like sailors who know the maps but have never faced the unpredictable sea. This is why a comprehensive, immersive 6-month practicum is essential. It reduces the dual burden of student and teaching responsibilities, enhancing student accountability and financial costs. And so, I proudly affirm the motion.
And to extend the case for Team Bethlehem Moravian, we invite their second speaker, Daniel Vassell.
Honorable judges, fellow debaters, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today, the proposition is asking us to believe that our education system is inadequate, that our teachers are somehow unprepared to enter the classroom without an additional 6-month post-degree practicum. This proposal insults our existing institutions. Firstly, Jamaica's teacher education institutions already produce highly qualified teachers. Across 4 years of studies, these student teachers gain theoretical knowledge and engage in episodes of supervised practicums. Darlene Hammond, 2006, justified this approach, stating, "Tight coherence and integration between coursework and clinical work, extensively and intensively supervised, is key for preparation going into the classrooms. And this is what our current system provides." Additionally, every 5 to 7 years, these institutions are accredited to ensure they maintain a standardized quality of education. Therefore, once student teachers graduate, their accredited educational institutions are confident they are qualified to teach. The government thinks not. The proposition overlooks the differences in purpose and stakes for postgraduate practicums and training practicums. Training practicums are developmental, designed for growth in low-pressure, supervised environments where mistakes are learning opportunities and feedback. Learning opportunities and feedback prioritizes improvement over judgment. However, postgraduate practicums function as high-stakes, high-pressure licensing assessments with rigid performance expectations. Not accepted. You are judging candidates on their mastery of skills such as adaptive instruction, emotional intelligence, and classroom management, skills that can only be developed through years of teaching experience. Jamaica's education system will not be validated through additional gatekeeping. What it needs is investment, induction and mentoring programs for new teachers, reduced class sizes, and adequate resources for our schools. We need to support our teachers rather than suspect them. Singapore's education system provides a good model. Singapore ranks first globally in maths, reading, and science in the 2022 Program for International Student Assessment. Singapore has built its success on a system of continuous teacher development, not on extended probationary periods. Not accepted. The country employs the Enhanced Performance Management System, EPMS, a framework for conducting annual qualitative evaluations. Singapore's Ministry of Education reports the EPMS focuses on personalized assessment that identifies each teacher's specific strengths and growth areas, which then inform individualized development plans to tailor to their unique needs and career development. This as opposed to removing the students from getting their license just because they don't meet the requirement. This approach frames teaching as an expertise that is developed rather than a fixed competency to be assessed once and certified. The 6-month post-degree practicum is a solution in search of a problem, one that will strain our education system, overburden our experienced educators, destabilize our classrooms, and ultimately harm our students. We must reject this proposal and instead strengthen the excellent foundation we already have. I thank you.
And thank you very much. At this point in time, we are now going to engage into our second period of cross-examination. And once again, we invite team opposition to pose their first question to team proposition.
Isn't it better to spend 6 months proving teachers competent than spend the years repairing the damage of poor teaching?
Hold on, my apologies. So we're actually going to allow opposition to ask the question or proposition first. Yes. So ready when you're ready, Team Bethlehem.
If you guys think student teachers are incompetent, why do schools across Jamaica take undergraduates to meet urgent needs in the classroom?
Because of teacher shortage, not because of their competence level.
Okay, so if there is teacher shortages and based on that time period they can meet the need, why is it necessary for a 6-month post-degree practicum?
Because what we're saying is though we have this shortage and we have a need to solve this shortage, most of these teachers that go into the schools are underprepared and ill-competent, which is why we have such low literacy and numeracy skills. We just heard on the news that the school have high school students are not reading at their grade level, and that is because incompetent teachers are continuously filling these rooms instead of competent ones.
Alright, so the second speaker mentioned that students in the past on practicum focus on compliance instead of competence. Won't your licensing program further push this need for compliance just to get the license?
What we're saying is that the 4 months practicum that we do really and truly tests academics. It doesn't test professionalism. It tests whether or not the student is improving and not whether or not they're competent enough to actually produce quality education. The 6 months is for licensing. This now is going to test whether or not this teacher can actually perform professionally and keep up to standard with the JTC, Jamaica Teaching Council's less standards that must be adhered to.
Thank you very much. We now invite Shortwood Teachers College to pose questions to Bethlehem Moravian.
Sure. Isn't it better to spend 6 months proving teachers' competence than to spend years to repair the damages of poor teaching?
Theoretically, yes. However, these teachers are not incompetent. You are attributing low student performance solely to teachers. You're not looking at the dynamics that some of the students are not interested in learning. Therefore, that's why the literacy rates are so low.
Singapore implements a similar strategy to a 6 months post-degree. And isn't there a difference, a huge difference between 6 months and 4 months?
And why do you think Singapore is taking international teachers? Because their same teachers that they give 6-month post-degree practicum still come out as incompetent, and that is the reason why.
So, will you accept that structured coaching improves instruction and student outcomes? Okay. My apologies. If licensure is about competence and not coursework, on what basis should licensing ignore the external JTC sign-off on when Jamaica teaching, on when the Act empowers standards? So licensure is about competence and not coursework. On what basis should licensing ignore the external JTC sign-off on when the Act empowers standard-based licensing?
All right, so the opposition is giving you the privilege to rephrase the question so that it's more understandable.
Okay. Why should we ignore the standards of the JTC Act when it empowers standard-based licensing?
I believe your question is based on the fact that, based on the assumption that standardized quality is not within the schools, because all of the schools, as I mentioned before, they're accredited. So there is a certain standard or a certain quality of education and training that the students get before they become teachers. So there is no absence of standard in competence when it comes on to that.
All right, and thank you for the second period of cross-examination. Can you give them a round of applause? Now, at this point in time, we will pause the debate for 1 minute to allow the finishing touches to be placed on those reply speeches, after which we'll invite the opposition reply speaker, followed by the proposition reply. And that 1 minute starts now. All right, and to conclude the debate for Team Bethlehem Moravian Teachers College, we invite their final speaker, Jaden Palmer.
Mr. Speaker, honorable judges, members of this House, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As the third speaker of the opposition, my task is to solidify our case, dismantle the flaws in the proposition reasoning, and close why this House must reject today's motion. The House requires graduates to complete a 6-month post-degree practicum demonstrating teaching competence before being licensed as teachers. Let us revisit what my teammates have shown. Firstly, from our opposition leader, teaching competence is not a one-time hurdle. It is an ongoing process measured through continuous evaluation, mentorship, and probationary licensing. A RIC 6-month practicum lies too heavily on standardized assessment, ignoring the realities on geography, school resources, and socioeconomic differences. The unfair teacher placement in struggling schools while rewarding those in privileged ones. Still worse, creates incentives for graduates to avoid the disadvantaged schools altogether, depending on inequalities in our schools. Now the government would have you believe that the 6-month period is the best way to test credibility for teachers before licensing. But Madam Speaker, let us look beneath the surface of this noble idea. They are really proposing a policy that is inequitable, inefficient, and fundamentally flawed. The proposition claims that credibility can be measured within 6 months. But how can you do such window within the complex evaluating nature of teaching? Teaching competence cannot be fully evaluated through observation, not only on a brief practicum. It developed through trial and error, through years of experience, reflection, and adaptation through classroom. If teachers are assessed rather than allowed learning through the first 6 months, we're allowing them to grow and we're simply policing their performance. The government proposal creates a restrictive licensing system that disencourages creativity, experimentation, and growth. The very process of helping teachers evolve into excellent educators. Imagine telling a teacher you cannot make mistakes because your license depends on it. The kind of pressure that stifles innovation and punishes risk-taking, two essential components of effective teaching. Moreover, let us not forget the inequitable building on this model. As my teammates have shown made this clear, the policy beneath the inequitable system, meriting education graduates beneath the resource urban schools will naturally perform better during their assessment period of those to rural or underfunded schools. This means the teacher would depend less on their skills and more on where they are placed, a fundamental and just of competence. Now let's bring back some key arguments from our deputy opposition leader. Firstly, that our education system is already strong, offering 4 years of studying multiple supervised practicum prepared by effective teachers. Secondly, he exposed the supervisory crisis. Our senior teachers are already overworked and adding hundreds of graduates on the underwhelming system. Thirdly, he pointed to the development of practicums of learning and high-stake licensing. Members of this House, the government's 6-month practicum will not make teachers better. It will make the system weaker. It wastes the limited resources, crowded classrooms, and for teachers restricted process that allows mistakes and the fundamental of learning. And the question of integrity is so-called of the month assessment, of how can be suffered to evaluate long-term competence, creativity, and adaptability. If teachers are focused on performing for licensing instead of learning through experience, then the system will produce caution rules, flaws of innovative educators. Madam Speaker, the quality is not achieved through unnecessary hurdles, but through support, trust, and opportunity. We must invest in teacher development and not teacher policy. For these reasons, the opposition stands firm. We reject this inequitable, restrictive, and counterproductive proposal. We believe in empowering teachers and not testing them into failure. We believe in building competence through experience and not assessing them through artificial timeline. And most of all, we believe that teachers grow best when they are learned, effective, and innovative without fear. Therefore, the opposition rests their case at this time.
Thank you very much, Jaden, for closing the case for team opposition. To do so similarly for Shortwood Teachers College, we invite their third and final speaker, Nacia Smith.
Honorable adjudicator, members of this House, and my worthy opponents, a pleasant afternoon to you all. I stand as the third speaker on the affirmative bench, ready to dismantle the opposition's arguments one by one, and to show clearly why this motion must stand. The opposition has thrown out a bag of claims that on the surface might sound convincing, but ladies and gentlemen, once we strip away the rhetoric and look at the reality of the Jamaican education system, it is clear that their case is built on shaky ground, riddled with gaps, and cannot stand up to scrutiny. Honorable Adjudicator, the opposition claims that 6 months post-degree practicum will delay teachers from entering the workforce, worsening the teacher shortage. But let us get real. Delaying an unprepared teacher is not a setback. It is a safeguard for students. In Jamaica, teacher training spans 3 to 4 years, yet the actual in-school practicum is short, limited, and highly controlled. As my first and second speakers clearly establish, theory alone does not equal competence. You cannot walk straight out of a lecture room and suddenly manage a class of 40 students with different learning needs, keep them engaged, and handle unpredictable classroom challenges. Therefore, a structured 6-month post-degree practicum is not a hindrance. It is a smart investment in quality education. So the opposition's claims collapses under the weight of reality. Next, the opposition argues that the in-school practicum is enough. Honorable Adjudicator, with respect, that claim does not hold water. In-school practicums are short, fragmented, and heavily supervised. Student teachers rarely shoulder the full weight of the classroom responsibility. In contrast, a post-degree practicum is an entirely different ballgame. Graduates plan full units, manage behavior, handle real-world issues, and receive continuous feedbacks from experienced mentors. This is not a repetition. It is reinforcement and deepening what the theory has already taught us. Saying in-school practicum is enough is like saying practicing in an empty parking lot prepares you to navigate the rush hour of traffic. It just does not. Their point crumbles under scrutiny. The in-school practicum provides exposure, but the post-degree practicum builds mastery. Then they went on to say it's too expensive and it is hard to organize. But Honorable Adjudicator, that is a weak excuse when weighed against the real cost of unprepared teachers. When inadequately prepared teachers enter the classroom, they fall behind, students fall behind, repeat grades, drop out, or require remedial programs. That drains far more resources in the long run. And let us not ignore precedent. Doctors must do internships, heart trainees must do apprenticeships, and in almost every skilled profession, structured practical training is non-negotiable. So why should teaching, the profession that shapes minds and futures, be treated as an exception? Now, ladies and gentlemen, the opposition also argues that teachers can learn on the job. And to be fair, they are correct. Practical experience is essential, but relying on on-the-job learning alone is reckless, especially in the Jamaican context. A structured 6-month post-degree practicum provides a safety net, allowing graduates to make mistakes, reflect, and improve under mentorship, take full control of a classroom. But not only will it build a strong practicum foundation, we want to build a strong practicum foundation, not replace it. It bridges the gap between theory and practice, shields students from the cost of inexperienced teachers, and ensures that when a teacher enters the classroom, they are truly ready. Other professions demand structure. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
I thank you, debaters, for a wonderful debate. Another round of applause for them, please. Trust me, they deserve it. At this point in time, the judges will excuse themselves to engage in the arduous task of determining who won this debate. In the meantime, we invite both teams to cross the aisle and shake hands with their opponents in the spirit of sportsmanship. Are you ready? We're ready? Can I have the two teams from the first match up on stage, please? All right. So, in the very first match, we saw St. Joseph's Teachers College face off against the Sam Sharp Teachers College. On the motion, this house supports performance-based pay. First of all, let's give both teams a round of applause once more. So, what did the judges hear? We heard an analysis coming to us from the first speaker, from the team proposition, that at the end of the day, a performance-based pay system encourages meritocracy. It encourages equity. And indeed, that was the substantive part of their case, that it is simply fundamentally unfair for a teacher who works very, very hard to be paid commensurate with a teacher who just sits down and does absolutely nothing. And that's unfair. And that is a part of the frustration that is causing teachers to leave the job and all sorts of bad outcomes. And we heard from team proposition that that's bad, and that a performance-based pay system solves for that problem. Team opposition comes, and quite cheekily, they point out a deficiency on team proposition. They ask, where is the definition? What is performance-based pay? And we agree with team opposition on that at the very least, we should have at least understood somewhat what a performance-based mechanism is coming out from the first speaker. We heard it a little bit more from you, second speaker, but we wanted to hear it from the first speaker. Team opposition demanded a policy from team proposition, which we don't agree with. This motion, the motion is this house supports performance-based pay. See, it is a supports motion, it is a value motion. It's saying what is the ethos that this government is going to be putting forward, right? It doesn't necessarily call for a policy. It doesn't necessarily say this is how we're going to do it. It simply says this is something that we think we should do. We are in favor of this. And so, even though in a values motion you can present a policy, failure to do so isn't necessarily counted against you unless there are mechanisms needed that you just simply don't have. And we want to go into a little bit of meta-analysis. We hear team opposition again demanding, how is this going to be funded? Team opposition demanding the question of, where is it going to come from? They're telling us that it's not going to be able to be done because of our current legislative situation. But then you have to understand, team opposition, that there's a thing in debate that we call a proposition fiat, which is the intrinsic right of proposition to do the thing. So the motion says this house supports performance-based pay. It has to be that it can happen. So saying that, well, it can't happen because of our legislature, kind of puts proposition in a position where there's no debate to be had. So proposition, you do have the fiat to say it can be done. If we have to change the laws of Jamaica, we'll have to change the laws of Jamaica. Whatever it is, it can be done, lest the debate cannot happen. And so that's just a little bit of debate method that we want you guys to pay attention to. Assume that the motion in front of you can be debated. Now with that said, what do we actually learn from in terms of substantives? We heard from team proposition and analysis of equity is important, but we heard a detailed and rich analysis coming from the team in opposition that equity is one thing, but everybody need more money, right? So the problem is that teachers aren't getting paid enough. And even if we were to implement a system of equity, that only works if you're at a baseline compensation, which you're not. Because what happens is that you're forcing teachers now to do more work to meet particular metrics for money that they should have been getting to begin with, right? We heard that from team opposition. We also heard a really interesting idea came in out from team opposition, particularly in their second speaker, right? Donovan. See, Donovan explains that a performance-based system is completely subject to certain kinds of fallacies. See, proposition's case is based on equity, but opposition tells us that it doesn't provide us with real equity. They tell us that one, teachers can simply just look at the metrics that are important, focus on those metrics, and complete those metrics, and completely abandon everything else. They would not have provided any more value. They are still, as they contend, lazy, but them get the money. And that significantly undermines the question of equity that comes from your team proposition. Now we wanted to hear an understanding of that. How is it that even if it is that the teachers are going to be meeting the metrics, they're still being more productive? We're tricking them into being productive because they're meeting the KPIs to get the money, thinking that they're being lazy, but the KPIs are exactly what we want them to be meeting in the first place. So maybe they're not being lazy, right? We wanted to hear that kind of contestation as well. We also heard about this general idea that, again, from Donovan, that fundamentally we just need a greater base salary and that no performance-based system is ever going to help to make the teachers satisfied because we can't keep up with UK, can't keep up with Japan, can't keep up with China, can't keep up with America, right? And so we think that's a really good and important part as well. So what it really boils down to is the analysis of the argument. Proposition's case is on equity. Opposition undermines equity, tells us that it is not the most equitable outcome, and because teachers can manipulate the system and you don't get that equity, and they also tell us all the bad things that can come, like people, working with each other to ensure that they get good peer reviews and all the other harms that come from such a system, given the context that what teachers need is fundamentally just more pay to begin with before we even continue with performance-based pay. So with all of that said, you can kind of get the idea of where this debate has concluded. The judges at the end of their deliberation, via a unanimous decision, considered that the team that won this match and will be moving on to the semi-finals of the TCJ debate competition 2025 is the team in opposition, Samsha Teachers College. Very well played, Sam Sharp Teachers College. Congratulations to Sam Sharp Teachers College. You ended on 264 points. Valiant effort, St. Joseph's Teachers College. Make some noise for them as well. Their score at the end of the debate, 253 points, a 9-point difference. The best debater from this match comes to us from the winning team, Sam Sharp Teachers College, and that is the second speaker, Donovan Hanson Jr. Congratulations, Donovan. We really appreciated your rebuttals, your analysis of undermining equity and the substantive that you put forward. Excellently done. Congratulations. All right, and so that is match number 1. As the teams make their exit, give them another round of applause, please. And we now invite the 2 teams who debated in match number 2, Shortwood Teachers College and Bethlehem Moravian Teachers College. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the first match was good, but this match was great. The motion read, this house would require graduates complete a 6-month post-degree practicum demonstrating teaching competence before being licensed as teachers. Mr. Lloyd Hyman came up and he presented a speech. He started it off with a beautiful status quo. He told us why it is important that we ensure that teachers undergo this post-degree practicum. He said doctors have to do it, pilots have to do it, and that teachers should be no different because the negative outcome of a bad teacher is just as catastrophic as a bad doctor and a bad pilot. We heard that from Mr. Lloyd. He defined his terms. He did a really good job in fulfilling his role, and then he got into the meat and the potatoes of the debate. He told us, quite frankly, that there is a gap between the theory and the practice. He tells us that when you leave the school with your 4-year degree and you walk into a classroom, you're a deer in headlights. And his solution to the problem, one that he contends will solve the problem, is to simply, well, have a 6-month practicum. And he goes a little bit further and gives us context that he knew was coming in the debate. He told us that there already exists a 4-month practicum, but that practicum is insufficient. And he tells us why it's insufficient. He tells us that it is insufficient because that happens in class, in school, while you're trying to get your education. It is highly theory-based, and that you get like 12 to 15 classes, supervised, controlled. Whereas the real world, you're a teacher alone in a classroom doing 40 sessions per day with absolutely no one to support you. And he says that 4-month teaching practicum is simply not sufficient. And then he jumps into the idea of how it happens in Signamore with their induction style. We think that was a really good proposition speak from you, Mr. Lloyd Hyman. And if we were to give you any kind of critique on it, it would be advanced level critique. So really well done on that particular speech. And then Mr. Tristan Bowen came. And he saw the performance by Mr. Lloyd and says, well, Fran, you're not better than me. He told us a few things. He told us that effectiveness is measured far more than one can appreciate in a 6-month practicum. That there are situations and resources and difference in pedagogy that a 6-month practicum simply cannot deal with. And then he presents an argument in the debate that the judges find so compelling and that we want the child team proposition for not responding to. He says, your policy, which the motion demands, because this is a policy debate, has a flaw in it. How will the teachers be put into the classroom in the 6-month degree? Well, let's assume that they get to choose the class that they want to do their practicum in. Well, that's bad. Because what that means is that the schools that are under-resourced, underperforming, with the challenging students who need the help, no teacher is going to want to go to that school because that's going to affect whether or not they get licensed. And that's going to disenfranchise that school and perpetuate systematic inequalities. And that's bad. But then he goes on to tell us that if they can't choose, that's equally as bad because that's going to disadvantage teachers who are going to end up being placed by the luck of the draw in these particular schools that are under-resourced, underfunded, with problem children, and that's going to affect their grade. So in essence, he's saying your policy, mechanized as it is, has a flaw. Either the students are going to suffer or the teachers are going to suffer. That's why we shouldn't do this. I think that's a very brilliant analysis, Tristan. And we think that's something that team proposition needed to have answered, especially in a policy debate where we're mechanizing it, right? We needed an answer to that particular question. And throughout the entire debate, we barely got one, if any at all, from team proposition. So we want to definitely chide you on that, right? But nevertheless, the debate continued. Janelle came and answered a question that was posed by proposition in the cross-examination. Why don't we do the 4-month practicum? Why don't we integrate the 6-month practicum into the school system? That way, individuals don't have a 4-year degree, come out and aren't licensed. And Janelle tells us quite frankly, because you can't be in school as a student and juggle simultaneously the work that comes with managing a classroom. Janelle tells us that the reason why teachers struggle so much on the first day when they get a job in the classroom is because there's no practical experience in building up the analysis that came from Lloyd in terms of how it is that you get that practical experience. And it needs to be a post-degree practicum, identifying the key term in the motion right there, post-degree practicum. It needs to be that so that the students are no longer students, them have them degree, and they can focus solely on ensuring that they do the job that they're required to do in the classroom. And we said it was a brilliant answer to the question of why not just integrate it into the status quo as is, right? So really good job there, Janelle. Give her a round of applause. Then the debate moved on to Daniel. Right? Listen, I really enjoyed myself, So you see, that's why I'm going one by one. Then the debate moved into Daniel, and Daniel posed a really solid claim, right? Daniel says that, quite frankly, you can only develop skills necessary that you want to get from your 6-month practicum in the classroom. It's something that takes years and years and years of experience, and disenfranchising teachers for a 6-month practicum to trying to get greater results is just not going to be worth it because it is something that takes experience. We thought that's a good idea, Daniel, but Daniel, you didn't use all your time, and that's bad. That's really bad. And in fact, you didn't use all your time, and then you also didn't accept any points of information. And so when the judges looked at the clock, you had a third of your time left back. A third of your time left back, and there was so much more that we wanted to hear. We wanted to hear more about Singapore's mechanism. We want to understand the difference between the slow growth feedback that you get from continuous learning versus this rigid thing that you get from the 6-month practical and why that's bad. And so while we really appreciated where you're going, we thought you needed to do a little bit more to really get us there. And then we move on finally to the reply speakers. Give us Daniel a round of applause. Then we move on to the reply speakers, and Jaden does a good job of summarizing exactly what happened in the debate. He reminds us that it's not a one-time hurdle, that getting good teachers is a continuous evaluation. He reminds us about that argument that still, up until that time, had not been answered in the debate, about how it disenfranchises the students and undermines effectiveness. And so we thought that was good, Jaden. All right? And then, finally, Nasia came and gave to us the better reply speech in the estimation of the judges. The judges at the end of your reply speech were absolutely stunned. We thought, listen, a reply speech is not something that is like intuitive. It's a really technical skill. And Nessa, you depicted mastery of that skill in your reply speech. And so, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of it all, taking into consideration, of course, the period of cross-examination, the judges weighed the debate, and we came up with a result. This is a really high-scoring match. The team that lost this match, based on their scores, would have won the previous match. The team that lost this match ended on 276 points, to the team that won this match, 280 points, a 4-point difference. And ladies and gentlemen, the team that will be moving on and joining Sam Sharp in the semifinals is the team in Proposition Chartwood Teachers College. Congratulations, Chartwood Teachers College. Ending on 280 points. Very well played to Bethlehem Moravian. There was a 1-point score separating the best speakers of this match. The best speaker from this match comes to us from the opposing team, Tristan Bowen. Tristan, I know it's not the outcome that you wanted, but you should absolutely be proud of yourself. Masterful debater, 79 points. Congratulations. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes round 1 of the TCJ debate competition. Round 2 will be happening at Bethlehem Moravian Teachers College, and that will be on October 21, 2025. You know your 2 semi-finalists. Let's find out who the 2 are from the other team. Congratulations to all the winners. Valiant effort to the non-advancing teams.